Hi, this is Dr. Ken Duckworth. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. One of the great privileges of my role is I get to talk to NAMI ambassadors who are leading our national conversation on living with a mental health vulnerability, their recovery, and how their life keeps going. And so today I'm very fortunate to have Gregg. Clark, of course, is a person who's well known from the film industry, but has also been, a real friend to NAMI and a hero to many of us, because there are some times when successful people don't want to talk about their struggles. So Clark, I want to say thank you for joining us. And
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I want to take it over and say, hi, my name's Gregg. I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a writer. And one of the great pleasures of my life is that I get, as a result of those things, to speak to amazing people like Dr. Duckworth here and to be part of a community that's reaching out to other people so that we get to connect on a broader level than we might otherwise about issues that we care about, and mental health and mental illness and the ancient attitudes that still, I think, keep people in shame and alone, struggling all the time, but especially here during this bizarre pandemic. It gives us a chance to reach out and connect to those people and say, you're not alone. This is nothing to be ashamed of. And we're going to provide a path where you can seek help.
Clark, the Center for Disease Control did a survey of Americans, and 42% of Americans are having clinically significant depression, anxiety, post-traumatic symptoms, or resurgence of their addiction. That's more than 2 in 5 people. And so this pandemic has been a real second wave of the mental health aspect of this is a second wave of this pandemic.
I try not to ever, well, that's not true. We all during this pandemic have been looking for the silver linings. And that's a hard one to say that there's silver linings in it, that so many people are struggling. But this might be weird, but as I've been aware of that, Michelle Obama said, we're all suffering with a kind of low-grade depression. It's been very clear to me that many, many people who haven't previously really considered themselves people who had to do anything special about their mental health are now realizing, because of the complete cessation of the normal patterns of their life, that they're struggling. They're locked up with their family, their dreams have been put on hold, various things, just the ongoing cortisol inundation of this much stress, the political divisiveness, all of this stuff. And so what has been, to me, beautiful in this sad way is that a lot of people are going, wow, tending to my mental health is a day-to-day job for me now, and I understand this better, or I need to understand this better. And I feel like there may be a positive, an upside to this over the long term, and that more and more people are going to take maintaining their mental health more seriously and realize it's something we should all be doing, which is one of the main reasons I came to NAMI. Is I don't know why you would take care of your body and leave out its most sophisticated organ.
There is no health without mental health. I think about this as this incredible opportunity for empathy. My dad had very bad bipolar disorder, and I wonder what he would think if he was alive today, because I think people who clearly have a vulnerability in society are often made to be the other. It's someone else. Well, now that I'm having more anxiety or sadness or sleep disturbance, maybe it's not that far away. Maybe it's not the other. Maybe mental health is a piece of the human experience that under stress we're all going to feel.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. I mean, I feel like we're all kind of walking around on a floor covered with marbles, and just trying to stay upright on that takes a bunch of your mental energy. And, in a normal day, if you walk out and your stress level is a 2, it starts at a 6 in the ongoing thing of pandemic. So when your normal stress stuff hits you, or you're already at an 8 out of 10. And so that's just for people, I think, who feel like they have a baseline that they can manage. But I think there's a whole other kind of segment of the population who weren't they were already at a 6 or 7.
That's right.
Addiction or bipolarity, as you said, or various depression, anxiety, mental health issues. They were already at a 6. They couldn't afford the 3 or 4 more of there's no chance for work. You have to be isolated more than you might have been. And really, it put a lot of people who were, up to their nose in water, it pulled them under.
That's right.
I think that's the great unseen toll, is that we may know about the people who died of COVID, but there's a whole giant other swath, in my opinion, of people who are dying as a result of COVID.
And loneliness is bad for mental health. I mean, connection is an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety intervention. We're not really allowed to see people now in a meaningful way. And of course,
no, we can't touch or hug people. I feel like, I don't know, is it oxytocin?
Yeah, oxytocin.
I can't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is very combative and brutal, but at the same time, it's a lot of physical contact, and you feel amazing afterwards, both from the extreme exertion, but just the contact.
That's right.
So many of those things that we hadn't thought were so essential to our survival have been stripped away.
That's why people are adopting dogs, right? Contact with something, right? To feel something, to hold.
Don't make me bring my puppy over here, because I adopt in the quarantine.
Puppies welcome. So is the puppy a quarantine strategy for you, or did you just happen to have a puppy airdropped on you by a friend?
Well, I very peacefully divorced at the beginning of the year. And so the 2 puppies, the 2 dogs that my wife and daughter and I share, they're living there with my wife, my ex. And I suddenly was dog free. And there were a lot of rescues available, especially in the early days, less so now. And I just started following. I thought this is a good time for me to have a new puppy. I rescued an orphaned, beautiful dog named Lucy from Mexico. And I knew it would be a good time for her in terms of I could be there to develop the bond and train her, and that it would probably also pay off a lot for me because we hug all the time.
You went through a hit in life, and your strategy, in part, I'm sure you've had other strategies, was to adopt or rescue.
That's one of them, for sure. I mean, I was already going through and processing this end of a long marriage, and going through the mediation and being, maintaining this very loving relationship and changing our family. And it was a lot. It was a lot to deal with in an isolated way. And then I also, I lost my brother, Andrew, 3 years, just under 3 years, my junior. Wonderful, wonderful, giving, caring guy. And that was a shock and devastating. And
sorry. Again,
I was on the marbles, and I was already reeling a little bit from the other life changes I was going through. And it's kind of odd, I'm embarrassed to say this, but when my parents told me, one of the first things that I heard in my mind was, how am I going to metabolize this now? Which felt so
everything else
outside of myself for this moment, when I couldn't believe how much grief I was feeling. And it was no joke. I had anxiety. I had anxiety over the grief. I thought, these feelings are so powerful, and I feel like I'm one of the people. I'm going under. I need to stay sober. I need to show up for my daughter, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And
I'm so sorry you went through that. I suffered a loss of my brother a year ago, and I went into a pretty deep grief/depression, but I at least had the advantages that we could have services. I could be with him in the hospital. And one of the things that I've observed about grief now is it's gotten distorted as well. So many of the rituals that hold us, whether it's an Irish wake or sitting Shiva or whatever it might be, have been removed.
Yes, it's interesting. My father's a brilliant theologian and minister, and I've always been impressed by his understanding of the power of rituals, whether I've seen him marry people in his own particular way or bury his parents with a ritual that was very powerful for he and his siblings and us. And I was fortunate that that's who he is, because my sisters and I, who were spread out, we felt very disconnected from the loss and live in a different city. And we realized how important it was, and we found a way to drive to where they were and to gather safely. My parents are in their 80s. And find a way to be together distantly, as painful as that was, and all get tested and find a way to grieve this terrible loss together, at least for a moment. But it's, that's another thing that's been denied people. And I think is really, I guess it goes to what we were talking about earlier, connection. Connection has been ruptured.
And also the grieving process, of course, requires connection, right? We grieve together. It's reassuring to see the other people and to share the experiences. And I've just been impressed at how much harder it is. So I'm really sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for yours now, because you didn't have some of these, hugs and hangouts and, making sense of what this was.
I feel very lucky. I have a very loving immediate family. My Jennifer and my daughter were a huge support. My friends really showed up for me with FaceTimes all day and night, and people really showed up for me. But it was, 2020 has not been fun for anybody. From the murder hornets, feels like every week I hear about a different bizarre new creature trying to kill us. But it definitely came for me for sure. And I feel, I don't know, again, I'm not always looking for the positive, but I feel in some ways lucky that I've had such a focused ability to do the grieving process, to work through all these other issues. And I would have had the palliative of intense work, which Hollywood's a little bit shut down. I haven't quite had that as much. It's been a little jarring on its own.
Another 2020 problem for a lot of people is uncertainty.
And the structures, frankly, it's better in many families and marriages for people to be apart and do their day and come back together. It's hard to kind of be all Zooming in different rooms. That's a real stress on people and families. Yeah. And I do think that that's one of the things where I have heard the conversation going on. I've heard a lot of people talking to each other about, let me just be honest, I could not get out of bed the last 3 days. I could not get out of bed the last 3 days. And other people going, well, that was me last week. So you're not alone.
That's right, you were not alone.
Really validates a lot of what NAMI's trying to do.
Yeah, a lot of people are struggling. And remember, we had a mental health crisis and an overdose crisis in America before the pandemic. Right, we were having very high suicide numbers and high overdose numbers. In fact, the American lifespan was beginning to inch down.
Is that true?
Overdose and suicide. The first time really since the last pandemic, we've started to see this impact. And, it just tells me that, we were struggling before this. And I think this has now kind of blown the doors open on people recognizing that if you have panic attacks, have depression, are relapsing with your substance use disorder. I should say substance use disorder. I was trained for substance abuse disorder, but we no longer think of it as abuse, right? But I have to retrain myself in this way. But, people with anxiety, depression, substance use, relapse, this is common right now. This is very common.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, again, I guess this is my theme. I try to look for what are we going to come out of this with that's positive, because it's been so painful for so many of us. And I don't know, I don't know how one can look at the pre-existing condition that several million Americans will now have and not think that, people need to have a right to health care. And I hope that extends to some support for mental health care, and that's more readily available for people as they come out of this, realizing that's something they have to manage.
That's right. Yeah, I think there is some hope that we might see more coverage, but certainly NAMI is available for people even who don't have mental health coverage, right? It's a support network, and it's a conversation about making things better. You perhaps know that there's a 988 legislation that NAMI's policy team and advocates help to advocate for. So if you're having a mental health crisis, in the future days, you won't call 911, which is a tremendous burden on our police officers who are not often well trained to handle mental health crises, not their fault.
It's not fair to them or the potential patient.
Right.
It's not fair to either side of that.
That's right. So the future state hope, this is one thing that has happened that I think most people have missed because there's been so many other stories. I think we're going to get to a place where people will be able to call 988 and hopefully get a trained person or team to help problem solve the mental health crisis. Approach it from a de-escalated framework.
And is it I know about this effort, but where is it now? Is there anywhere you can dial 988 instead of 911?
This is all going to take time, but I think your Verizonville will start to have a couple of cents on it as they build this infrastructure. It's going to take a lot of people from NAMI to create local services that work. So it isn't here now, but it's law, and it was signed by the president and both houses of Congress, and it makes a lot of sense. This is a lot to ask, our first responders. So tell me how the holidays are going to work for you. You've suffered this loss. You've clearly had a difficult year.
Yeah.
The holidays can be activating for me and for my patients, right? In terms of loss or things that happened in the year. How are you thinking about that?
Well, it's part. I had a hard conversation with my mother and father the other day about, as much as, especially this year, we want to all be together, it's just better not to.
Yeah.
And we feel that based on the news about the vaccines and the tremendous success they're having with their effectiveness rates, that we feel that the end is in sight. And so we're going to be responsible, and we're going to do some version of setting up this camera during our meals and share it with each other that way, and know that we'll be able to be together next year.
Clark, I think of you as kind of an action star, and you had some really cool guns in some of your shows, like really cool, right? And I'm not even a gun guy. Would you say that action has been a strategy that's been effective for you? Or have you found the action process to be somewhat traumatizing in its own way?
What do you mean the action process?
I think of you as an action actor, right?
Well, I would
think of you in
that's later.
Yeah.
Sorry,
this is again when I've gotten to know you, right?
Yeah.
I think of you as a successful action star, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure many other things, but that's where I've seen you the most.
God bless you. And what's the question behind that?
How do you think is action, which is often helpful for men, been a positive strategy for you? And now that Hollywood's on pause in a way, do you have alternative strategies? But that question assumes that being an action person or engaged in these, action films has been, a strategy, a coping strategy.
No, it's been very lucky. I've always been someone who needed to be physical for my mental health. Always needed intense exercise in one form or another, and things got better for me when I figured out ways to do that. But two of the ways that I've always done that is to play basketball 3 or 4 times a week with the same group of guys for 20 years.
Nice.
And particularly in jiu-jitsu, which is an intense grappling and an amazing art form that is actually widely known within that community as being a source of mental balance, because you're under intense duress and you must breathe and relax to keep your mind open. And the minute you stop, you just feel your thinking power decrease. And both of those have felt, given the people I'm responsible to in terms of, immune compromised things, within my bubble, I couldn't do them anymore. And so I had to stop. And that was one of the early big challenges. Luckily, I had started, and luckily I live in Los Angeles near the beach. I had started surfing. So I was a bad surfer who had just started out and taken some lessons. And during pandemic, I've surfed, I don't know how many days it's been, 280 days of pandemic. I've surfed 245 of them.
You found a way.
I found a way. The action stuff in the work, it was a blessing in the Marvel universe, because in addition to the scenes where you're acting up a storm and fighting and talking to the bad guys from Hydra, there would then be these intense fight scenes, and it was a chance to be physical at work. And so it really lowered the stress level, and it was something that was really fun to incorporate that. And it gave you a real reason to stay in shape, because if you weren't, you'd pay for it. So, luckily I do a lot of stuff. I work as a screenwriter sometimes, I work as a filmmaker, and I did sitcoms before this. So any one of those things is a release and a getting out of the house. And those have really all shut down for the most part. I was lucky I got to do a really interesting project the last couple weeks finally, but I was alone in a room acting with someone else on a screen, because it's a movie that takes place on screens. So that it could be safe. So you're still missing the
magic.
Yeah, exactly.
We had discussed briefly that the Avengers appears to be a ripoff of the NAMI story, where many fabulous people with individual strengths come together to battle overwhelming odds. Do you still think that's true? Because it looks like Avengers and NAMI have a lot in common to me.
Oh, absolutely. When I'm around the key players, including yourself at NAMI, it feels like a flashback. And I know that you've been so discreet about saving your ability to turn into a giant green superhero at any moment.
It's only a matter of time. Clark, is there anything else you'd like people to know or reflect upon based on your experience of what's been helpful for you? It sounds like becoming a surfer has been an amazing outlet for you.
Well, yeah, that's one is, I don't know why, but physical, intense exercise, the chemicals it releases, the way it keeps me in my body, so much of mental health feels physical to me when I'm having an anxious moment or too much stress built up. The signs are always in my body. And so getting connected and doing things. I think of meditation as physical. Those things really, really helped. I guess the only other thing is that NAMI has always been so impressive to me, in that they were very specific about the idea that if you're struggling, if your mental health needs attention, anything that makes you feel ashamed about that, you should question. It's probably wrong.
That's right.
And you can see it everywhere around you. People are like, oh, you have a therapist? And you go, wow, absolutely I do. And frankly, I can get you a number, because you could probably use one too.
Right. Well, you're not alone, right? I mean, the entire NAMI thing is, some of these conditions are so challenging, and there's so much shame in our society about them. The idea is, together, you realize there's an old expression, pain shared is pain halved. And you give to other people, you of course benefit from that. Like one of the pieces of the peer movement is being a resource for others is helpful.
Absolutely, and it's one of the main reasons that I decided to be open about my story, is that it makes me feel healthier and better. When I'm struggling, I like to be of service. And the other thing that I think a lot of people, they get a little bit, I'm all right, I can take it, I'll suck it up, out of some silly thing that got drummed into them when they were young. And I think, well, okay, but even if you decide that you think you can handle it and you don't need it for you, when you're taking care of your stress, your anxiety, your anger, whatever it might be, the real people you're doing that for are your wife or your partner or your child, because they will see your self-care as something, as being modeled, and they will learn to do that for themselves. But also, you won't be running those energies and choices on them.
Yeah, that's right. And then the family culture can be one of understanding and learning as opposed to shame and, you know, having these forbidden spots. And NAMI's been beautiful in my life for the same reason, the idea that, you know, opening the doors and windows on these ordinary human vulnerabilities makes a difference. And together we can get things done, whether it's the mental health parity law or the 988 legislation. That's how we work together to advance this cause.
Yeah.
Well, Clark, it was great to talk with you.
Always a pleasure. Really nice
I
to
wanna
see you again.
Thank you for your time.